Molly and Steve Hart have been married for 18 years and have a 16-year-old daughter, Abigail. She prefers to go by Abby and has her 17th birthday next month. She is very excited to graduate and start college next year and live away from home. Her parents are not excited about the moving part, but happy that she is a wonderful young lady. She has excellent grades and makes friends easily. Her best friend since middle school is Megan, who lives 2 houses away. Molly and Steve seem to have a very loving marriage. Steve is an architect and has worked at his job since college. Molly is a veterinarian and loves her job. She is in practice with her friend Jennifer. Lately, Molly has noticed that Steve seems distracted and doesn't want to talk about it when she asks. They have always had a loving relationship and could talk about anything, not knowing what is going on. Molly just continues to observe and not nag. Abby has spring break the next week, and the plans were to go back to Charleston, SC, as they have done every year. This year, Steve has a business trip and can't go for the 7-day trip. It would just be Molly, Abby, and Megan this year. Megan has gone with them on vacation for the last 4 years. After discussing with Jennifer, Molly's best friend and partner, Molly set cameras up in the house without telling anyone. Jennifer's husband David is an attorney and suggested this would be a good way to prove that nothing is going on with Steve. Steve is his best friend, and he had not confided anything to David, so he felt like it was just worry from work making him distracted. He promised not to say anything about cameras to anyone, especially Steve. David did not tell Molly, but he had noticed that Steve was distracted and had canceled their plans more than once. Abby was very excited about the coming trip. They had been doing this for 8 years, and there was always something new to explore. Her mom had told her she could drive this year from Charlotte, NC, where they live, to Charleston, SC. As they were loading the car on Sunday, Megan came over to tell them she felt sick, and her mom, Amy, had tested positive for COVID. Abby started crying because Megan was sick and couldn't make the trip with them. It was very quiet in the car as Abby and Molly left for the week. When they arrived at Edisto Beach outside of Charleston, they were surprised to see the cute little cabin they had rented. It was adorable, painted blue and right on the beach. There was a church youth group staying in the house next door, and they included Abby in their fun. Abby had a wonderful week with them and only called Megan twice. She was pleased to hear that Megan was negative for COVID and that her mom had gone back to work. Molly had a peaceful, restful week, reading and walking on the beach. She didn't have to worry about meals as Abby ate with her new friends most of the week. On the trip back home, they both decided this was their best trip ever, but agreed not to tell Abby's dad or her friend. Molly had not checked the cameras once, as Steve told her he was out of town. When she arrived home, it was the next day before she thought about the cameras. She opened her laptop and found the app for viewing. At first, she planned to just watch what was on them, then delete. She had decided in her peaceful time at the beach to not worry about Steve's distraction, as it is probably just temporary, and she trusts her husband. When she finally watched the videos, she was shocked at what she was seeing. Steve was not out of town, and he was having an affair with Megan. She is just a few months older than their daughter, and at 17 years old it is not legal. Steve is 46 years old, which means he is 29 years older than Megan. Megan is more outgoing than Abby and has always dressed provocatively like her mom. Amy. There is no father in the picture, and Amy has lots of boyfriends in and out of their home. Molly could not believe what was happening, and she knows Abby will be destroyed when she finds out. Molly got ready for work, but before leaving, she saved the recordings. They had a lot of appointments that morning, but when they had a break, she showed Jennifer the recordings. She knew she could trust her friend and needed advice. Jennifer was as horrified as Molly, and she phoned her husband Richard. He came right away to their office, and when he saw the videos, he told Molly they will have to report to the police. Molly asked Richard if he can represent her in divorce proceeding, and he agreed. He phoned a friend of his, a detective on the police force, and he agreed to come to their office. Detective Rogers arrived and was introduced to Molly and Jennifer. Molly explained she was very upset that her husband was cheating, but more upset that it was with a young girl just a little older than their daughter. She also told him she does not want to be vindictive or bitter, but felt like she needed to do the right thing by reporting. Detective Rogers explained to them that in NC, a 17-year-old has a right to consent for sex if their partner is only about 4 years older. Age difference of 29 years is a problem, and legal action can be taken against the male individual. Molly gave all of the recordings to the detective, and he was going to talk with his superiors and get a warrant from a judge. He warned Molly that Steve will probably be arrested for statutory rape of a minor, but it will be up to the judge for final verdict. He asked Molly if there were any more recordings, and she remembered that their doorbell had a recording. She explained that the cameras in the house were just added recently because her husband had been acting differently lately. Also, with her 16-year-old staying home alone some, she felt it would be safer. She opened the doorbell camera and they all watched as the postman delivered the mail. UPS delivered a package. Then they got a surprise. Megan and her mom Amy were talking at the front of the porch on the same day as the video recording in the house. Amy was telling her daughter to be careful and not tell Abby anything, but advised her to try and get pregnant with Steve. That way they could cause Steve to divorce Molly and they could move into this nicer house. Amy said she wanted to own a home in this neighborhood instead of renting. The 4 people watching the video were stunned that a mother would be saying these things to her teenage daughter. From the conversation they heard, it sounded like she had been encouraging Megan to have sex for a while, and not necessarily with just Steve. Molly actually had to step out of the room and go throw up. It made her so sick to her stomach. Amy congratulated her daughter on finally getting Steve in the bed, that she herself had tried for several years and had not been successful. Detective Rogers said that he thought a judge would actually issue a warrant for the girl's mother for encouraging her daughter in a scam. Child services will be involved. He advised Molly and all of them to not say anything to Steve until all of the official papers had been signed. When he left, Molly sat down and cried for the life she no longer had and for her daughter, who will be devastated. She took the afternoon off and went home to prepare a meal and be there when Abby got home. She washed and disinfected the whole house, and especially their bed linens. She was sick to think she had slept in her bed the night before, and very glad she had not been intimate with her cheating husband last night. Steve had a vasectomy about 10 years ago after they decided they only wanted one child, so she knew he didn't have protected sex. They waited until Abby was 8 years old before making that decision. When Abby came home from school, Megan came with her as this was the normal. It was all Molly could do to even speak to the girl. She stayed for their evening meal, and Molly noticed the secret looks and flirting between Steve and Megan when they thought no one was looking. When Abby asked if Megan could spend the night, Molly told her not tonight as they still had things to do after their trip. Abby was not very happy about that decision, but Molly felt like she could not stand Megan and Steve any longer. She felt like hitting Steve on the head and tell him to wake up as he is an adult and has ruined his and a young girl's life. When it came time for bed, Molly stayed up later than Steve and then conveniently fell asleep on the couch. Not that she got very much sleep anyway, as she was feeling so torn. The next morning, as Steve was getting ready to leave for work, the police came with a warrant for his arrest. He was shocked, as was Abby, who had not left for school yet. The arresting officers stated that Steve was being arrested for statutory rape of a minor, 17 and under. Steve looked at Molly and said, "Honey, there has been a mistake. This is not true. Please call David to meet me at the station." Molly replied that David was her attorney, that Steve might have to contact someone else. He looked at her in disbelief as he was placed in the police car. As they were taking him away, Amy, Megan's mom, was being arrested for child endangerment. Child Protective Services were picking Megan up at the same time. Afterward, Molly and Abby sat down. And she told her everything about the recordings and the conversation between Megan and her mom. Abby told Molly she could not believe her friend would do that to her family. She knew Megan had been sexually active since she was about 15, but had no idea she would do something like this with her dad. Molly asked Abby if Megan had tried to talk Abby into having sex, as Molly knew that Abby was not sexually active yet because they had discussed this subject on their trip. Abby told her mom that Megan had been making fun of her, but she knew she wasn't ready for that step yet. They sat and held each other and cried. Abby stayed home from school that day as she couldn't face anyone at school. Molly phoned their family doctor and got a referral for a family counselor. She and Abby went together that afternoon for an emergency appointment. Detective Rogers phoned Molly to warn her that the news media were reporting on Steve and Amy. Megan's name will be left out of the reports because of her age. Also, Megan's maternal grandparents were coming from SC to pick her up and take temporary custody. Molly asked Abby if she wanted to talk with Megan before she left town, but she said no. She felt like she wasn't ready to face her yet. With the counselor, Dr. Smith's help, Abby was able to go back to school the next day. She was really surprised at all of the support she received from the students and teachers. Molly went to the jail to visit Steve. First, he said everything was a lie, and the videos were fake. That he tried to apologize and say it will never happen again. But Molly held firm. Her husband of 18 years was a stranger to her now. He then told her it was her fault because she had gained weight and was tired all the time. She smiled sadly at him and told him it was his fault, not hers, as Dr. Smith had helped her. Also, she told him that David was filing the divorce papers and for him just sign when presented to him. She will list the house for sale and divide everything evenly between them. She will expect him to help Abby with college fees, but she can handle everything else herself. She stood up to leave but turned back to Steve and said, "I don't want to know if this is the first time you have betrayed our marriage vows. I do want you to know that I have always been faithful to you and loved you with my whole heart." Megan's mom, Amy, was charged with a Class G felony misdemeanor for committing a willful act of negligence to an underage child. She was sentenced to 24 months in jail and lost custody of Megan. Steve was charged with second-degree sexual offense. Megan was 17 and age of consent in NC, but Steve is 29 years older than she is, and the judge felt like he should have been a better influence for her. He was sentenced to 48 months in jail. Abby went one time to visit her dad in jail before he was transferred to prison. They just looked at each other and cried after Abby asked him, "Why, Daddy? Why did you do that to us?" She never got a straight answer, and only visited him on his birthdays and Christmas while he was in prison. Abby never saw Megan again, and she always felt sad over her lost friendship. Megan did send a letter to Abby, but did not apologize for what she had done. She told Abby it was her fault for having a perfect family, and she was jealous that Abby had a dad. And she didn't. Even Abby knew that was a ridiculous excuse. Lesson learned: never cheat. It can ruin your life. The sad ending.